Basically, we randomly started doing it because we were constantly talking about interesting facts, and we thought, let's just record this and see what happens. And I went along with the flow of it, which I think is generally how I do this.
We ran it on QI a few years ago.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a fish.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a fish.
No, seriously, it's in the Oxford Dictionary of Underwater Life. It says it right there, first paragraph, no such thing as a fish.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, no such thing as a fish!
Have you ever had all of your teeth taken out at the same time? They used to do it in the olden days, didn't they?
Yeah.
You know, on your 18th birthday, you'd have all of your teeth removed, and I imagine it was a bit like writing a book.
Yeah.
That is hyperbolic. It was fine.
No, it was.
It was
fine,
very
wasn't it?
fun, really fun.
It was fun because what we did was we read all of the news for the whole year, didn't we? And then finding the best bits, and we put them all in a massive file, and then we turned it somehow into a book.
Yeah, but it's very different to how we do the podcast, because the podcast, it is genuinely our own research that we just bring to the table and say out loud, and we're each hearing it for the first time. In this case, this book has one voice the whole way through, so we had to somehow work out what the four of us wanted to sound like on page. That still captured the tone of the podcast.
My favourite fact today from our book is that female dragonflies avoid male attention by faking their own deaths. And this was only discovered this year. And they, like, loads of them do it. So they did a study, and the scientist looked at 31 female dragonflies, and he found that 27 of them, when they were being chased by undesirable males, would suddenly plummet to the ground. So that he said they'd plummet out of the sky, crash land into the ground, and lie motionless on their backs until the male dragonfly departed. And almost all of them are doing this.
It explains so many parties I've been to. I just thought I was cursed that everyone died at all the parties.
How many people were you hitting on at the party? You've left a whole room. Is he gone? Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. But so, I don't know much about dragonfly communities, but do they hang out together? As in, like, does it get to Monday and, like, Sharon comes back in and he was like, Mike's like, I thought you were dead.
But I think they do have WhatsApp groups, the women, where they warn each other about next week. Play dead with Brian, that kind of thing. Wow. I think we'd love to write together again, right?
Yeah, we've written a book which is not, you don't have to be a fan of the podcast. The idea is that this functions as a book, and hopefully it'll be something that returns every year.
Yeah, you don't need to have heard the show at all to
Yeah.
read the book. It's for anyone who's got an interest in anything that might have happened in the year.
Yeah.
Anyone who's interested in anything. I'm quite bad on popular culture or nerd, like comic book stuff or movie stuff, things like that. And that's something that Dan, for instance, likes that sort of thing quite a lot. So that's just a thing where if there's a fact about that, then I know I'm going to find that more difficult to research because I don't have that real baseline knowledge. Do you know something else really frightening about spiders that we mentioned in the book is that they eat twice as much meat as what you do every year, I think. So they found that out this year. 800 million tons of meat and fish they eat, and that means that they could eat the human population twice over every year. Isn't it? So they can be as double. Which is weird because that also implies that humans eat exactly our body weight in meat every year. Is what that implies. Who knew?
There's a lot of maths going on.
Yeah, there is. That's something we can all agree on.
Anna, you specifically love etymology.
Anthropology?
Yeah.
Anthropology.
History, but then I always try to look outside of those areas. We all try to
That's
cover
the thing,
all
yeah.
areas, really.
Yeah, I don't think you could bracket us into individual things. Me, more so with the weird love of the cryptid and all the weirdness and mysteries of the world and the untrue facts. But we don't, we don't specifically limit ourselves.
No, I think if we did, the podcast might get a bit boring, really.
Yeah.
Because if we knew that third one was always going to be Andy's literary fact, then perhaps it might be a bit boring, but you just never know what you're going to get.
So I quite like etymology, which some people find quite dry. So I remember having a fact that was the word fascinate literally means the divine phallus. And, you know, I had to push for that a little bit. And also, in fact, did you know, I really like the human body and weird stuff about how it works. So I think recently my fact was that if you draw a dot in indelible ink on your eardrum, within a couple of weeks, it'll be on the outside of your ear, because your eardrum, the skin on it, grows outwards in a spiral at about the same length as your fingernails. It's cool, right?
Hearing all these interesting and kind of silly things, and the guys on it are really funny as well. So
it's quite interesting to put the faces to the voices. That was the weirdest thing, because you only hear them on the podcast. So now it's like, oh wow, you actually know who they are, which is good.
They've got really nice fans, so it's a really nice vibe in the room. It's great.
I listen to it when I walk into work in the morning. But also I know Anna, she's an old school friend. So we used to sit next to each other in English. We always used to gossip a lot at the back of the class.
I was quite a bad student at school in that I was quite disorganised, and I think my teachers found me frustrating, but hopefully occasionally amusing enough that they forgave me. So literally every Latin class, about 15 minutes in, our Latin teacher would come thundering into the common room and have to shout at me to get there. Or I did quite a lot of accidentally ending up in the pub sometimes rather than in lessons. But I did really like my studies as well, and I did fine. And you know, when I came to writing an essay and submitting it 3 weeks late, I always loved it. Detective. Yeah. I used to actually stage crimes at my house, my parents' house, so that I could solve them. So I had this thing called a spy file, which was like all the tips for how to be a detective, and I got the outfit and stuff. And I once staged a burglary where never tell my parents I've admitted to this because I've never told them, but all their jewellery got stolen and their possessions, and then they were found strewn across the field next to our house, and there was a footprint of a burglar found from a burglar who'd run up the drive, and then there was a torn bit of bin liner because he'd obviously been carrying them in his sack, and then we found that, and there was a battery from where the battery fell out of his torch. And so there are all these clues that led us to the jewellery, which thank God I managed to track down and return to my family. I don't really have one as such. I have an email account, and that's it. Yeah, I've never done social media. And so I'm not on Facebook or on Twitter, which makes my life kind of more exciting because it means that I'm constantly surprised by stuff that the others tell me that they've seen on Twitter hours ago that I'm learning for the first time. But yeah, I've just never really got round to it, and I think I probably don't have the self-control to do social media without accidentally sacrificing the rest of my life and sinking into a Twitter hole. Is that the lingo?
This is unbelievable. For facts that the audience have been sending us in.
Yeah.
I've just got one over email from Rosie Snell. It's quite long, but the residents of the town of Mechelen in Belgium are known as moon extinguishers after a man exiting a pub one night in 1687 sounded the alarm believing the town cathedral was on fire. But when the bucket chain reached the top of the tower, he realised it was just the moon, partially concealed by low cloud. No, it was just me.
Often our fans tend to know a lot of interesting stuff and have a lot of interesting things to say. So when you write back, then they've often emailed in with a really interesting fact, or often a series of really interesting facts. And I've had loads of times where someone's written a question in and then I accidentally spent an hour researching what their question was to send them back an answer. So it's quite enjoyable writing back.
Actually, one of my favourite bits of news that we discovered this year came from Queensland. And it was a guy who I think wishes his crime hadn't been reported. It was a guy called Terry Peck, and he's a rapper, an Australian rapper, and so he goes by the name 2Peck, obviously.
So good.
And very strong.
So good.
And he tried to escape a restaurant bill this year by running away into the sea. So he was at a seafood bar, which makes sense, and he racked up this massive bill. He had 2 lobster, he had loads of beers, and he had 15 vodka shots, which I think explained his subsequent moves. And then he got the bill, it was huge, and he thought, I'm not paying that, so he got out of his chair and he legged it into the ocean. And when he got chased by policemen on jet skis, he attempted to escape from them by hiding underwater. It's the most short-term strategy I've ever come across.
Anna always like the 30 seconds before we need to go on stage or do anything, needs to go to the toilet.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah, it's literally
It's so annoying.
It's like we're about to be announced on, and it's like, I'm going to go to the bathroom. Is there a bathroom around here? And even if you're like, there's not, it's like 5 minutes away, she'll be like, great, see ya. And then she's gone.
I always feel bad, and you've usually gone on stage when I'm still in the loo.
Yeah,
so I'm
we've
always
done
like,
that, yeah.
is Dan going on stage, wondering if I'll even turn up?
You've actually never heard Dan's intro, have you?
No, that's why I go to the toilet at that time, actually. I never intended to be a performer, and I don't really have aspirations to take my performance career elsewhere. So if I make a fool of myself, I don't really mind. So I think, oddly, Andy and Dan probably get a bit more nervous because they are performers and it's part of who they are.
This person is definitely a rule breaker. It's a politician. It's the person who was sworn into office at an inauguration ceremony on the 20th of January this year in America, who I think we can all agree is not well qualified for the job, barely speaks English, and yet I am of course talking about this person. This is playing pretty loose with the word person. It's a dog, it's a pit bull, and it's also a mare. So this is a pit bull called Bryneth Paltrow, and January this year she was elected to be mayor of a small town in Kentucky. And yeah, it's actually her 4th term in office. So she's genuinely doing really well. They've been electing dog mayors for a couple of decades, but this year she faced some quite stiff competition. So she was up against a cat called Stella, a donkey called Higgins, and a chicken that didn't have a name. And she beat them all. And I think, I listened to an interview with her, sorry, I read an interview with her, she doesn't do the talking thing. And I think she won because of a quite strong policy platform. So these were her main policies that she announced. Paltrow's policies are that she will bring peace, love, and understanding to the small town, which is very sweet. And she also promised that she would try to stop chasing cats. Because no one wants a politician who grabs pussies.
Beer. Beer.
Yeah.
Beer. All white wine.
Mixing it up.
Lamb sip.
Lamb sip. 2 pints.
Yeah. When Anna gets drunk on tour, as she always falls downstairs,
Yeah.
and she
One
goes,
time.
"Oh my goodness!"
The one time.
She's
That's a good
like
one.
in that scene in Notting Hill where he says, whoopsie daisy. Anna has her whoopsie daisy moments.
Oh my goodness, everyone says that all the time.
No, but you always, it's always a whoa kind of, Mr. Bean sort of esque noise.
Dan and I did once drink a pint of champagne and then felt incredibly drunk for the second half of the show.
I think this year has actually entailed a bunch of other characters that have been great, and that's the main thing that I've enjoyed about writing this book. So
Okay.
I'm going to introduce you to some of those. So yeah, I think one of the things... Oh, you were supposed to sit there. Thanks. Well, I'm out of here. That is genuinely the worst thing you've ever done to me.
I think on a tour we often have slightly lighter facts. We try to make people laugh a little bit more. Doing a podcast, we tend to run for a bit longer, and we'll maybe also try some more terrible jokes on the podcast because we know we can rely on James to cut them out and no one will ever know. Whereas in the live show, we try to keep the embarrassing comments and jokes to a minimum. I think the performing live and the meeting people afterwards is really great. All of our fans who come to see the show have something interesting that they want to tell us. And it's just really fun meeting so many new people all the time. Late nights in travel lodge bars, which are open 24/7, which is a real godsend, is pretty fun. And also, getting to know the other three's personal habits and hanging out with them, I suppose. Don't tell them I said it, but it's quite fun to do.
We tried to smuggle a load of beer out of the bar, which we had already bought, but they closed the bar. And I put all these beer bottles in my bag, and I didn't hear my brother say to me, "Anna, don't put those in your bag, they've all been opened." And so I got home and there were 3 beer bottles worth of beer all over all of my tour clothes. Yeah, did I not tell you? I had to stay up till about 4 in the morning washing my clothes and then drying them.
Oh my god.
It was very annoying.
We love doing it now. We can't see that we'll stop doing it, and so I'd be very happy doing the same thing in 5 years' time. You know, as long as we get to all sit around and discuss stuff that we find interesting and people want to listen, then very comfortable with that. I would think it would be a challenge to have 4 people work as intensely together as we have for the last 6 months without one of us killing the other one.
Yeah.
I think we did better than the Beatles. In terms of working closely and not hating each other.
And if you think about it, they're bigger than Jesus and we're bigger than them.
Wow.
There you go. Us, the Beatles, Jesus.
Jesus.